Well, unfortunately, Western Speedway's closed down, but if you were there the last couple of seasons, then you may recognize his voice, as well as if you were in attendance at Evergreen Speedway or a couple weeks ago at the Las Vegas Bull Ring at the Open Wheel Showdown. We're talking about one of the rising stars when it comes to announcers in all of North America, talking about Cole Sorenson, about his starts in announcing, as well as a new gig in Alberta. That's coming up next on the Getting Up to Speed podcast after these messages. Dave's Home Supply specializes in cabinets, flooring, and countertops. Visit their website at daveshomesupply.com to look at products, services, financing, and even a free estimate. Are you looking for bookkeeping, payroll, or income tax services? Then check out the folks at For You Simple Bookkeeping. They are a licensed tax preparer throughout the entire United States. For more information, click on the link in the description. Well, he's joining me from beautiful, gorgeous, and scenic Vancouver Island, BC. It is Cole Sorenson. Cole, great to have you on board, the voice of Evergreen Speedway, and just getting done with a really incredible weekend of action a couple weeks ago at the Las Vegas Bull Ring for the Open Wheel Showdown.
Yeah, it was busy last few weeks with obviously with the Open Wheel Showdown, Davey having me down for that, and then as you mentioned, doing some guest stuff and kind of doing the majority of the big events for Evergreen Speedway throughout the 2023 season. It was a bit of a busy year travel-wise, but very, very exciting few weeks.
Well, and it's got to be a change for you, a little bit of a shifting of gears, at the unfortunate closing of Western Speedway in Langford, not too far from where you live, and kind of having to, I don't know, how hard was it? Well, obviously very hard, but for you, a racetrack that's iconic in not just Western Canadian history, but North America, and you've kind of got to figure out sort of a game plan to move forward.
Yeah, that was the tough thing with Western Speedway closing. Obviously, the track's about 25 minutes from my house, which makes a nice, easy commute for quite a few years. I was, I think, 14 when I first started announcing there, so it was 10 years of going down there pretty much every single weekend, and with that wrapping up and the closure of the facility with the selling of the property, with property values just getting so high to a developer, it kind of killed racing on the South Island a little bit. There's obviously a second track up at Saratoga Speedway, which is about 2 hours from where I'm at, another 3 hours from kind of where the majority of the Western Speedway racers was. They kind of had a plan in place on their end, and it kind of was still going to be quite a long drive up to Saratoga. So we had the opportunity with the Hogs to come down and pick and choose. It wound up being quite a few of the races to come down, but work with Derek Todorov, who's their young announcer there, and kind of try and help him along and help for their big shows as well. So that was a very cool opportunity, and got to do some pretty cool stuff for the Granite Sprint Car Series all the way through to the Mark Galloway Shootout, Summer Showdown, and their War of the Wings race, as well as the Arkham Menards West Series race, and several others. They're big events. I know they've got their banquet coming up there in a little bit, which we're going to be kind of emceeing and having that here coming up in January. So not quite finished with the 2023 season for Evergreen just yet, but getting ready to roll into that.
Well, and I think I had heard, Aaron Wilson had told me, and I think other couple of folks had told me that there kind of sort of is a plan for that Victoria area to kind of search around for a replacement for Western Speedway. Anything that you've heard of lately?
Yeah, there's it's kind of been what everybody else has heard over the last little bit. They're still actively looking around the South Island, kind of within that hour and a half drive, so that people can still make it make it work with work and racing, and not having to take too much time out of their weekend to drive up and kind of make it a one-day thing. So there's still some things in behind the scenes that are going on actively to try and get a property acquired, which, probably in Oregon and Washington State, it's the exact same thing as trying to, convince people that building racetracks a good idea in the 21st century is a little bit of a tough sell, but definitely still a dedicated group here in the island that are still looking to try and get that accomplished. And the dream is not fizzled out yet, so still some hopes in that environment. And I think they're going to try and work to make sure that when they do find something, it is a long-term and a viable solution that is going to run into problems 5 or 10 years down the road. It'll be something in a place where people can go for years to come.
Well, yes, that was the point I was going to make too. Is Eastern Creek Speedway in New South Wales was the replacement of the iconic Sydney Speedway, and the government basically shut it down for like a tram system or something that was going through, the track in Sydney. And then they have Eastern Creek, and they put all this money into it and made it top shelf quality. But then there's just problems with it. So you just hope that, that doesn't happen, and history repeats itself in that regard.
Yeah, that's definitely something where you don't want your $70 million speedway paid for with taxpayer dollars and it's government owned to just sit vacant after issues. I know I've been following along with that. It's funny that the tram project, by the sounds of it, might not even go through. So they pretty much demolished Parramatta Speedway for no reason, and they're now kind of stuck without racing in Sydney. So definitely trying to avoid that. I think it's what they're looking at is having a nonprofit society that can kind of steer that clear and not kind of make those same mistakes that you'd see maybe from a government-led project where it's contractors that don't know anything about racing and a government that doesn't know about racing that winds up getting the contract to that and actually building facility.
So Evergreen Speedway, prior to being so much there this year, wasn't your first time there. I remember hearing stories about you with, as an up-and-coming talent in the industry from Fred Renner Jr., obviously Evergreen Speedway, the home of the Rory Price Memorial, and you guys actually got a tag team a little bit.
Yeah, I think the first year I went down there, we were just watching was, I don't want to say 2015, whenever the first year that the King of the Wing came for the one of 2 years. There was 10,000 win race, and I kind of hung out up there with Fred. And then a few years later, the NSRA wound up kind of bringing me down in a volunteer sense of things, coming down and paying the expenses type deal to do the Rory Price. And it was cool. I got to do that for a few years when it didn't clash with the Western Speedway schedule. I think it was 2 or 3 years that we did it with Fred, and I got to experience racing down at Evergreen with obviously the wing pavement sprint cars, which are huge up here in the island, as I think most of North America found out with the Islanders and BC racers representing. And I know Aaron, not necessarily an Islander, but plenty of island connections. So it was definitely a cool experience to go down for the Rory Price race. And of course, RZ and everybody that put on that event are super cool people, and was cool talking with them as well down at Vegas with Evan Marginson, who's been putting in quite a good season at Evergreen, and then won the Pink Lady Classic for $30,000 as well. So it's cool to have that connection.
Well, and just for references, I'm sure you were there for the one race when Vancouver Island was referred to as an island in the middle of nowhere for one of those shows. And I'll just get, spoiler alert for the listeners, Fred Renner Jr. didn't say that. So
yeah, that was kind of funny. Or I think even with one of our favorite island celebrities, Pamela Anderson, one article referred to her hometown as a remote fishing village off the coast of Vancouver or something. But yeah, it's Vancouver Island's home to the capital of the province, the Olympia, you could say, of BC, Victoria, and there's just under 1 million people on the island, so it's far from remote. You do have to take a ferry. It's if the wind's not blowing and everything else, it's a semi fairly well streamed ferry service that does give you a little bit of problems, and you do have to cut off a limb to try and afford it sometimes to get over. But
sure.
It's not remote, and it has its own auto racing culture, kind of with that separation from the mainland. Though you kind of have to be self-serving with your racing, and over the years it's developed a lot of great talents Roy Smith, obviously three-time Winston West champion, used to be a horse in open wheel racing with the Daffodil Special back in the day that traveled all up and down the West Coast, and great names like, Gary Kershaw as well. Billy Foster, who went on to race in the Indy 500, was best friends with Mario Andretti before he tragically got killed, and so many other great names that, you wouldn't expect from an island in Canada, and still kind of surprises a few people.
Well, and not just the capital of the province, but the salmon capital of the world in Campbell River, which isn't too far from Saratoga Speedway, and home of the Bolio family. If there's any listeners that watch a lot of IMCA racing or even UMP stuff, they go down to Volusia a lot, and Jason's did very well over the years.
Yeah, if you're wondering where those guys with a little bit of the weird French last name come from, that is where they're based out of Saratoga. It's funny, they between Jason and Chris, I think they've won in pretty much every single class up there at Saratoga, and of course, Jason transitioned to racing in the dirt, as well as quite a few of the other guys. There used to be a track even further north, Port Hardy, I believe, that ran dirt modified. So they're pretty well versed in a variety of different things. Even the Skagit Speedway track champion in modified competition this year, Jeff Morris. Jeff was from Victoria and used to race at Western regularly, and everything from started in Hornets, ran street stocks, and then the last thing he kind of ran there was a late model, and then a pavement modified as well with the iMod modified series here on the island, which is kind of a offshoot of the old IMCA series that used to run on the pavement here on the island.
Well, it's crazy bring up his name, because I bumped into him when I was in Arizona last, and he's like, "Hey, you remember me?" I'm like, and I was just like out of it, just because I was adjusting to the climate. I'm like, "Oh yeah, man, what's going on?" kind of thing, and then he's like, "Jeff from Skagit, you're at the Survive the 55. Machosen, BC, former ARCA BC late model champion. Okay, yeah, I know exactly who you are. Yes."
Yeah, that's kind of the funny thing, and all the weird different suburbs that we have in Victoria that all the guys were from. I know the Open Wheel Showdown team had some fun with Jeff Montgomery, who was in the outside of the front row for the Open Wheel Showdown, kind of going the old five flag speedway, from get this, hear this, from downtown Langford. Jeff Montgomery, they had some fun with the promos and that. So yeah, it's cool to see Island connections, and I think pretty much I think there was half of Western Speedway was down there too. So it was a cool deal.
Well, and super cool too. You mentioned Port Hardy. That's where Sir Lawrence O'Connor races of IMCA fame and everything. But I think it was Triport Speedway, and then a pretty prominent track for dirt that I remember reading about and seeing pictures of, and used to have their own sort of dirt cup, Cassidy Speedway, on the island too.
Yeah, Cassidy Speedway. It's kind of sad looking back how many tracks kind of fallen by the wayside, which unfortunately here a lot of it's the neighborhood pressure as opposed to lack of racer support. But Cassidy, it used to wrap up. I think it was from what Fred and all the guys I know from who raced there back in the day and kind of switched to pavement racing when the dirt stuff wrapped up. Used to be the weekend after Skagit Championship weekends. They used to get a bunch of the Skagit people, Shauna Wilski, John Youngquist, Justin's dad. A bunch of those guys would come over, Rick Favre, and they'd run the Skagit or the Canadian Dirt Cup, you could say, up at Cassidy. It was a pretty cool place, kind of a little bit more smaller scale than what Skagit or Rays Harbor would be, but definitely had a cool atmosphere, and they had the campgrounds right off turn number 3 and 4, which made for some interesting post-race partying afterwards, especially for Rod Perkins, who used to come over, and I think he still has the trophy from the last ever Dirt Cup in his garage at Cassidy, since he didn't have to give it back since the track closed in the off season when after he won it.
Yeah, gosh, I remember. I don't think he ever came down to Cottage Grove, but he was a part of NST in the early days. Kinzer Kennedy's dad, Darren Kennedy, right? Blue 55. He was kind of the man there. If I remember looking at some of the old results at sprintcarhistory.com, or at least rose to the occasion many times at that facility.
Yeah, he was one of the guys to watch. I think he won 2 or 3 of the dirt cups back in the day. And Todd Heikus, who was originally down from down south, he married a Canadian, came up here, and Cassidy was his home track, driving the Benoit Farms car. He got a dirt cup. They had to, I think, run Mark Houston's car as his backup car the one year in '94, if I'm not mistaken, and he won the dirt cup there. So, and Todd was up until a few years ago involved still in the ownership side of things, helped out with the non-wing car here on the island. So, it's cool to still have those connections. Scott Almond's another name from back in the NST days that he won 5 wound up going on to win 5 Daffodil Cups at Western Speedway and running on the pavement very successfully throughout the Northwest. But, all those names and, Kinzer and Kyle still up until a few years ago, we're running dwarf cars. I think Kinzer's been having some fun, messing around with dirt bikes and stuff. And Kyle started a family, but I know he's still got his mini sprint kicking around for when he can finally get some time off from the 2 kids in his logging job that keeps him pretty busy. So Island connections run through everywhere.
Yeah, I think it was one of the 360 Nationals at Skagit, and Todd Heikus was having just this Cinderella run, and Fred was telling me the story. I think like one of the wing mounts broke, or the wing tree in the back came off, and he was just trying to hold on for like dear life. And I forgot who beat him, but I remember that car coming down. It was like yellow with a checkered flag, and I think like purplish, like a dark colored numbers 77. That would have been early NST days in the mid to late 90s. But man, yeah, definitely you're bringing me back memory lane for sure.
Yeah, there's actually that whole race is on YouTube. If you look up 95, I think it was a 360 special, they called it back in the day.
Oh yeah, Thunder
and
Valley,
Fred. Fred pointed that out to me when I was talking with him when I went back and watched that race, and it was cool how much the crowd was kind of cheering for him there. And I think it was Rick Father wound up winning it, and even that was in like a photo finish to the stripe. So yeah, it was, I know Fred mentioned it was one of his standout memories calling that race too. So very cool that it also emerged on YouTube. So for the people that either were too young to remember or needed to refresh their memories, they can go back and watch it.
Absolutely. Well, for you, you said 14 years old, Western Speedway, that was the beginnings of your announcing career. But what led to that? What led to you becoming an announcer, and how did you get involved in racing?
My dad's always been involved in racing. He, had buddies that him and his buddies would go out to Western Speedway, and he went to college up in Nanaimo where Cassidy was. So pretty much every single weekend he was out there watching sprint cars on the dirt. So he's always been a sprint car and drag racing guy. So we'd always watch, Strawberry and Daffodil Cup and some of the other late model races. We had a guy, Donnie Smith, who used to run the old Northwest Pro Stock Tour that my dad used to work with at the sawmill here on the island. And, we'd always go watch him race until he kind of wrapped up his career. And my dad got into crewing for some local sprint car teams and was just at the track all the time. And then my voice dropped when I was in middle school, and my teachers started getting me to do a bunch of at school announcements and PA stuff, and I kind of thought like, hey, like I wonder if the guy doing the announcing at Western needs any help, because that'd be a good way to get in free at the races every single weekend. And turns out, Rocky Horn, who was the announcer there for 32 years, he was looking to get out of it, and I asked him at the right time. So that summer where I was 14, I shadowed him for the summer so that he could kind of introduce me to everybody, and I didn't come in completely cold. And then they turned the reins over to me at 15 years old by myself to announce at Western. And then that lasted right up until end of last year, 2022, where, unfortunately the track closed. But yeah, it was a little bit of a crazy journey. And I know even still, when people kind of see me, they go, really, that's the announcer? Are you sure that's the announcer? But especially when I was 15, we had people's neck snapping as I went up the stairs talking, being like, he can't be serious.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're talking about. That sort of feeling of disbelief of, wait, this guy talks or something. Because for me, I had to change my voice a lot. Like my norm, and even to this day, like my normal talking voice is a little bit different than my show voice, or whatever you would want to categorize it on, my announcing voice. Just because, naturally I'm just a slow speaker and everything. And then like I get all kind of wound up, not auctioneer wound up, but yeah, no, more high pitched. So yeah.
Yeah, that was the thing too, trying to figure out the announcer's voice over the course of it. Looking back, it's like, oh God, I don't know how anybody thought I was good when I first started, but
Yeah.
Fortunately, have transitioned to become semi decent and hopefully listenable.
Yeah, no, exactly. And then, your style changes, right, over time, and you find things that don't work, and you do work. And for me, I think probably my base was, okay, Johnny Gibson and Fred Ranner, mingle those two together and somehow make it work. And then there's parts that didn't work about it, and there's parts that did work about it that I still use today. So, go with what works, and then don't go with what doesn't work. It's simple but hard.
Yeah, the trial by error thing definitely is well, and then part of it is too just getting up and having the confidence to talk in front of people. I know that kind of built over time, but it still gets me right before I turn the microphone on. Before every show, there's still that little bit of nerves until you see what happens, and then kind of you get into a little bit more of a zone and can kind of get through the night. But yeah, it takes a lot, and I think that's kind of why a lot of people don't want to do it. It's in some ways a desired job, but it's in some ways it's definitely not a desired job, where there's a whole lot of people kind of lining up to do it.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there, because I'm that way too. And sometimes it's not even in a huge event. It's just like at there's only a handful of, there's less than 40 cars or something. It's quote unquote an easy night, and it's just like, okay, all right, I can do this. I've did this before. It's almost like a Coast Guard rescue guy or something. It's like, all right, I got to jump in the water. All right, am I ready to go? Well, I need to do this. There is somebody that, the service needs to be provided here, but at the same time, it's just kind of that initial jump kind of thing, and then it's fine. So.
Yeah, definitely. Fortunately, it's not like the Coast Guard where we have any lives at stake. If we do make a mistake, we just have an angry business owner that we mispronounce the name, or somebody's mom's yelling at us. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yep. Yeah, no, I agree there. Yeah, can you hold on? Can you just swim for like 30 minutes while I just get my head set right here? So, yeah, no, totally. So I looked something up, northwestsprintcarhistory.com. Adam Ulray does a great job of preserving a lot of stuff on there. So May 19th, 1995, because I know Fred is probably going to be calling either you or I and just, like, well, this was the day. It was a Friday, so it wasn't the finale. But yeah, Ricky Favre in the 39. So that would have been the Will Kennedy 39 that Rory Price drove for. Gary Taylor also had a stint in there. So lots of connections with either the Evergreen Speedway or the island in on Vancouver in BC.
Yeah, it's definitely cool to track that, and the Northwest Sprint Cars site is definitely something you can go down into a wormhole in real quick.
No doubt, yeah. And what I really like about you is your love and appreciation for the historical aspect of it, because there's a lot of people that they're just caught up in the now and everything. I'm not saying that's wrong. There's nothing wrong with that, like the modern stuff. But it's cool to be nostalgic and kind of just to see where things have came. Like, this guy is that person's grandson, or who was a sponsor, a car owner, a driver, or this guy's parent raced at this racetrack that's no longer there, or they moved from across the country because of a work related deal, or this guy's parents, both of them raced. There are stories where both parents raced, and it's just kind of cool to uncover and dig some of the little neat facts that you can pick up.
Well, yeah, I think too that's something that I always like listening to as a kid, and it kind of helps tell a story and make that connection for the fan, as well as if you have that background information, maybe they can relate to something like, oh, this guy's a fireman during the week, my uncle's a fireman, that kind of thing. Or they can more easily make that connection for a fan where they're experiencing it either for the first time or they're looking for somebody to root for when they do come out to the racetrack. So all that is part of the storytelling, and I think you've seen that even on a definitely a way bigger scale with Drive to Survive, where as soon as Netflix kind of revealed the behind the scenes of F1 drivers, everybody started to kind of jump on board and definitely pick up, especially in the U.S. with rooting for that or making a point of watching Formula One, because there is that stigma among the general public that it is just cars going in circles, and once you find out all the stuff that goes on behind it, that definitely is a little bit of a tip. And the announcer for a long time before social media was kind of the only way that the drivers had any connection, and the fans had any connection or knowing what was happening. So I still kind of want to go by that background knowledge, and having that background knowledge, and especially if there's downtime or anything, you can always rely on that to help fill in the time and fill in the schedule as well.
Yeah, I mean, you hit it spot on. It's once you're able to sort of, I don't know if the term is right, the words I'm putting together here, but humanize, to paint a picture. This is an actual person. Like, this is what they've done, or this is what they do in the middle of the week, or this is what they want to do. This is what their plan for the rest of the schedule or for the season is. And people are like, wow, that guy is, he's coming back from a major injury, from, be it racing or work related, or, a family tragedy. And it's really kind of cool because, it's not just a bunch of numbers and names racing around it. It's people.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's, the cool thing where I think everybody's got who you're cheering for, and especially at a short track level, a lot of the fans are made up of people that know and that interact with the people either outside of the racetrack or with the racetrack. And I know, it can develop so many different relationships, even in the Western Speedway side, seeing all the businesses that would support racing throughout the town and running into people pretty frequently, being that you're all in the same community that, I think I still can't go through Langford or the West Shore where the racetrack is without running into at least one or two people that I know every time I go through there. So it's cool to see those relationships develop and tell those stories as the years go on.
Well, and another aspect too is, and you can probably definitely relate with this, announcing's a juggling act in itself, and then you throw the streaming kind of angle at it. So not only do you have to be mindful of announcing for people that are basically sometimes listening on the radio, be a radio announcer, but also a TV broadcaster, while also trying to entertain the crowd, while also, like you said, being mindful that there's probably people here for the first time that don't know these connections, they don't know the history, they don't know the culture, but also not like beating a dead horse with the basic stuff for those diehard fans that there's probably more dirt or gas racing fumes in their body system than is what the legal limit, so to speak. So it can be really tricky.
Yeah, and the streaming component adds a whole other element to it. I know, just recently working with the Open Wheel Showdown, you had the speed sports side of things. I was on the PA side of things and trying to integrate those two. It took quite a few different meetings and trying to figure out what the best way to go about that was, and covering for the streaming broadcast when they're having some downtime, but still being able to wrap up your thought in time to throw it when they go for their victory lane interview, and trying to juggle with that, or just like even working with the Flow stream where we had the Summer Showdown this year and Mark Galloway shootout on Flow at Evergreen, and trying to make sure that you could still service everybody that was at the racetrack, but at the same time throw the proper commercial break for Flow if there was any downtime. So it's a whole other added element that is onto the short track announcer spectrum, and definitely, you're juggling three different roles at once, trying to make sure that everything goes smoothly.
Well, and what's also tricky too, and I don't know if you ran into this, is you have a producer in your ear. So you're talking and you're listening to yourself talk, and okay, I sound all right, and then you're just calling the race, and it's like we're cutting to this shot, send it to this person, and it's like it takes a little of adjusting, but it is tricky sometimes. That for me, I think, is something that just because I'm not around it all the time, I think is kind of one of those deals where it's like, man, if there's one area I really need to improve in, it's not like be a deer in the headlights. It's like pause for 3 seconds. Okay, we're sending it down to this person, or we're switching this off somehow.
Yeah, that's definitely something where fortunately during the week, for the most part, doing TV stuff with our local TV station is my day job. So I've had experience with the producer in our ear, and then for the last few years before Western closed, it started as a COVID thing, but carried on. We did a live nationwide broadcast on Rev TV, which is the Canadian version of Nav TV, as well as on Check, which is the local station in Victoria, and that went out all throughout the province of BC. So yeah, that was something where you're announcing preliminary heat races on the PA, and then you have 45 minutes to flip around and change into a suit and do the national TV broadcast. And the first year we did it, the communication system to the truck for the actual talkback feature, where the broadcast truck can hear you, but the broadcast can't. That actually quit. So I was having to pretty much, and it was their first ever time with the production company covering a race. So pretty much over the broadcast, I was giving them cues on to where to put the camera, where to show, and what cameras they should be using, but trying to incorporate that so the audience wouldn't know over the broadcast. So that was a little bit of a challenge, but apparently it came off well, and we wound up getting nominated for our RTDNA award, which is basically the Canadian news and sports broadcasting equivalent of an Emmy, alongside of the World Junior hockey broadcasts on our version of ESPN. So it worked out okay, but it was, as you mentioned at the time, pretty stressful trying to make sure that it all flowed without it completely falling apart at the seams.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just one of those things where it's kind of tough because you want to be respectful and listen and not be talking, but and for me, multitasking in that regard can be kind of tricky, especially when you're interviewing somebody and they're like, ask them this question, and you're listening to the answer that's being given, and it's like, I have no idea what this guy's telling me, but I know what my next question's going to be. So
yeah, it's kind of like going into drummer mode where you're trying to manage everything, the bass drum, and you have the sticks in your hand and everything, and trying to separate the two and function. It's definitely a different way of going about things that people wouldn't really understand if they're watching a broadcast or get the full picture of it.
Well, what's really cool though is you're a TV guy, and sometimes you get TV guys and you get radio guys, and this is no swerve at them, no slam on them. They've got great voices, they know how to talk, they know how to present themselves and stuff, but as far as racing, they really don't know about it. But then you've got people that know a lot about racing and know how procedures work, formats, inverts, all those sort of things, procedures, but they may not be able to talk as well as a well-polished item. So that's you're definitely a rare breed, which is really cool.
Yes, and that was kind of why I wanted to do TV, to get that experience, to kind of bring it to a racetrack and be well-rounded. And I also I can shoot video and all that as well, and edit and do those type of things. So all that's kind of helped me with announcing. I haven't found a role where I've been able to put it all together into one thing yet, but I do have all that at my disposal. And it was cool with the TV station being partnered with the racetrack. I could show up and do a story, whether it was a promo for a race or there was a cool storyline, and kind of cross-pollinate between the day job and the weekend job, at least when Western was still around, and still have that good PR role where the racetrack's getting exposure and you're creating content as well for the TV station.
Well, and you're not also having to you have like sort of a leg to stand on when presenting a story versus Joe Johnson from down the street says, "Hey, can you do a news story on my racetrack?" And you probably can spot these a mile away too, of people, that news reporters that don't know anything about the sport. They just kind of, this NASCAR type track, or something like that, just using that as an example. Whereas, kind of, what you're talking about, you're a guy talking that knows about cars, that's talking about cars, versus somebody's like, I don't really know how these things go, but this is what they're telling me, that this is how these cars operate.
Yeah, and I think too that something that maybe racetracks don't understand when they're reaching out to a media outlet is that a lot of times they either don't realize that the event's going on, or the event's as big as it is, or they just don't have that background knowledge. So maybe if you're too technical with your explanation, the story gets lost on them. And I think that was something that hopefully I was decent at, was conveying, the basics of it, where it's like you can explain to somebody that's never seen a race before, oh, okay, like it's X, Y, and Z, like a NASCAR style event, but it's local people being involved, and this is why it makes a compelling story, instead of the thing where it's like, okay, forward the poster for the event, and here you go. A lot of times it's a little bit more digging than that, and if you have those compelling storylines, it's always good to send in the pitch. If you're sending an email like that and you are a track promoter, to send a storyline, be like, oh, it's a national race, but a local guy is competing in it, this is what you should do, and it makes the TV station's job a whole lot easier with the promotion, and it also makes your job a whole lot easier, because you've gotten hopefully your message across, and they have a rough idea of what they're going into and what they're covering, and the coverage doesn't come out like, whoa, these guys had absolutely no idea what was going on out there.
Yeah, no, totally. Of like, I don't know what this is all about, but these things are really loud and fast, and it's competitive too. Like in my area, like University of Oregon athletics, whether it's track and field, basketball, definitely football, it is super competitive to just try and get like a minute of a news station's time, because it's all about seconds essentially. Sometimes you're only limited to like 30-second exposure, so you have to like package it to where is get as much information, almost like an advert, as much information as possible without over explaining it, and like you mentioned, being too detailed to where the listener or the viewer gets lost. But also you have to be mindful that you're going up against popular sports that have lots of eyeballs, and just hope that maybe you can catch some of them.
Yeah, and that's all of that that's about, and especially if you can, without forking over huge advertising dollars, it's essentially free advertising and free airtime if you do get that attention and more eyeballs on your facility.
Yes. Well, 2024, you mentioned 2023 is not quite over yet for Evergreen Speedway. 2024, pretty much same stuff on deck for you, or do you got some other stuff that you're looking to accomplish?
We're going to be switching it up. I'm going to be joining the team, the new team at what is now Radtorque Raceway, just outside of Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. It used to be Castrol Raceway, Budweiser Raceway Park, Capital City Raceway, and used to have, you were talking about the NST days, the NST used to come up for the Canadian Gold Cup at Edmonton. They have a new owner at Radtorque Raceway, which just took over their facility this off season. Daryl Midgley, who I used to work for at Western Speedway, used to be the promoter, son of Reg Midgley. He is going over to help kind of manage the some of the facility and their bigger events. There's a drag strip as well that has NHRA National Division 6 National Open, has a big Nostalgia Nitro funny car race that usually gets 10,000 people to that, and also a road course which has the Canadian Superbike Championship, which is the Canadian equivalent to Moto America. So quite a few big events, and the oval side of things, unfortunately, was kind of lacking the last few years, not through anybody's one thing, but kind of a combination of different factors. And that's part of the new owner wants to get all three elements of the facility up and running at full song and attract major events at all three parts. Easy for me to say at Rats Fork Raceway. So going to kind of come in there and do it looks like a lot of PR work and helping out with some of the day-to-day stuff. And hopefully here early in the new year, going to fly out to Edmonton and get my first look at it. I know Daryl's already been hard at work, and we were both down at Warpa representing it and trying to make some connections with some of the dirt tracks down here, and hopefully get some stuff coordinated.
Well, I've been there once, 2016, and it's one of my favorite places. I feel like, and this is no disrespect to your neck of the woods, just because I never made it to Western or anything, but like I feel like Edmonton's like my Canadian adoptive home. And I hope hopefully I don't get any hate mail from you, but, Edmonton, everything from Edmonton Oilers being my favorite NHL team and all that. And being there for the Gold Cup, that was such a bit, I'd heard about it, Fred was a part of it for so many years. And then just to go there, it was like, wow, this is incredible. This is a fun place, even though it's a little tricky to get me across the border and everything. It's definitely something that I'm never going to forget.
Yeah, it was, unfortunately that's one of the events that fell by the wayside with COVID and everything and border restrictions and that. Obviously, relying on a healthy contingent of Washington and Montana cars coming up for that race. They haven't had the Gold Cup in the last few years. I know initially talking with Daryl, 2024 is going to kind of be for us learning year. They have their program that they've run there for the last few years. They've got a pretty healthy contingent of sports and sprint cars, about 18 to 20 of those, and a few other different local classes. So this year will be kind of a sit back and see type deal where we're looking and seeing what areas we need to make improvements on and making small strides towards that. And then in the future, kind of looking towards bringing back some of those marquee events like Gold Cup. They used to have the World of Outlaws. I know with High Limits coming up, they've kind of taken over the Northwest Swing. So, kind of maybe looking down that road eventually. Obviously, it's not going to be, something that next year we're just going to jump up and take that huge plunge without that knowledge. But, looking at revamping that and trying to get the dirt side of things built back up there at Rad Torque while still having great programs with the drag strip and on the road course.
The drag strip program has been super popular, super successful, and it was really cool going there. And you're up in the tower, and obviously you're looking in front of you. There's the 3/8 mile, and then you look back, and they have maybe some trial runs for like a drag race that they got going on. And I remember like Saturday, late afternoon, they had like a road course deal going on. Like it is a fully functional, like anything that you want to be a part of motorsports park, they've got it. And it's super cool. And it's, I want to think it's like closer to Leduc more than Edmonton. And it's a racing town, which is really, really cool. Or at least it was in 2016 when I was there.
Yeah, that's kind of the cool thing is that it's right beside the airport. So, knock on wood, noise isn't too much of a consideration in that place. And Leduc, which is the closest town that it is to, is very supportive of the racing program. Edmonton itself is a pretty big metropolitan city that, kind of like, like a Seattle or something, has a lot going on, especially in the summer, but still has a great pool of fans and race fans to kind of draw from in that area. So, and mentioned having test runs in the back. Well, sometimes they're Friday night street legal drag races. You've got drifting going on at the same time. So it's a 2-for-1 ticket. I know they did it at least once where it was Friday night street legal drags and racing on the dirt track. So haven't heard yet if that's in the cards, but still have pretty decent schedule. It should be coming out here in the next few weeks with a few different new kind of events thrown into things and trying to improve the events that they already had.
Well, I'm really looking forward to seeing that development happen because I know that 360 sprints have played a prominent role in the Pacific Northwest. I mean, technically, Alberta's on the other side of the Rocky Mountains, but a lot of those drivers have came to Washington, to Oregon, and have even went on to do some really cool things. Skylar G. He's a guy definitely that is out there getting it done, doing very well. Jeff Hodgson back in the day, Jeff Beck and Taylor Pensman and the Tim Boychuk, Wade Fleming, Sean Moran. I mean, just names that are popping off in my head that were from that Alberta area that would, come down. And Mark DePerrin, another one. Really strong roots of 360 sprint car racing. Definitely looking forward that it could come back. And Sean McDonnell too. McDonnell racing a bit on the West Coast this year too.
Yeah, and it's funny, we ran into the gang from the ASCI's Frontier region. We were bugging them that Kelly Miller, their champion, is from Lethbridge as well. So I know Kelly's been trying to get them to come up, and we maybe put a word in their ear that it could be a cool expansion for them. They had a full slate of races scheduled for 2023, but again, something that could pop up for 2024, and hopefully you'll get the Gold Cup going once more.
No doubt. Well, that's super cool. I'm really looking forward to that, and hopefully, if the cards are right, it's definitely a place I'd like to visit in the future again too, because that's it's such a neat place. Yeah,
it's definitely unique, especially in Canada, to have that triple element. There's a lot of places like Mission Raceway Park outside of Vancouver that has a road course and drag strip set up, but to have the three different disciplines at your disposal is pretty cool in terms of trying to plan events, coming up with events, and especially promoting the facility where you always have something going on throughout the season.
Well, I know that we've covered a lot. It's been an enjoyable conversation, Cole, but before we let you go, people that you want to thank, I'm sure there's a lot of individuals that have helped you get to the spot where you're at and continue to help you to the spots that you're going. Do you have time to give them a quick shout out or just name a few folks that stand out?
Yeah, sure. Of course, obviously, Daryl Midgley, who we're going to be working with here coming up in 2024. Daryl's been great from the time I first got hired at Western Speedway all the way through now, and me stepping up into not just an announcer role, but kind of helping out with actually a little bit more of the promotional side of things. Daryl Crocker from Western Speedway and Western Promotions, still talk with Daryl, and he's kind of spearheading that new track that they're trying to get built. So, always keeping tabs with him on how things are going, especially with the Vancouver Island Safe Speed Association. Rocky Horn, who I mentioned, who had to drag around a 14-year-old kid in his last year of announcing a racetrack, which I can imagine was high up on his priority list. But it still made the time for me when I was young, and even up until the last night at Western, he was actually announcing up at Saratoga, but we managed to bring him in through a little FaceTime call that we piped in through the PA system so he could say his goodbyes on the last night. So that was a super cool moment. And just everybody else, my family who had to ferry me before I got my driver's license for like 20 weekends a year to go announce pretty much every single weekend to rack up some serious gas mileage. But I know, that's like many families involved in racing, especially with young drivers and young careers. So just in the announcing side of things, and everybody else that has helped out through the journey.
Well, great to hear, and definitely an enjoyable conversation, as I said, Cole. And looking forward.
And I gotta throw. Yeah. Sorry, Ben. I gotta jump in one more. Throw in Doug and Tracy Haas from Evergreen. I know they'd be kicking me if I didn't thank them as well for the last year and having me down to help us out to help with their races.
Oh, you're absolutely, it's totally fine. It's okay. Well, this has been so enjoyable, and we'll definitely stay in touch, and I'm looking forward to see how things go for you. And, who knows, maybe one of these days we'll cross-pollinate or tag team a show together.
Yeah, sounds good. If I ever find myself in California in the NARC series there, but or in Oregon or IMCA race, we'll make sure to swing by and say hi.
Awesome. Sounds good. This episode is a production of Highside Racing Promotions. Be sure to like the YouTube as well as Facebook page and like these videos. The more likes and the more attention it gets, and we would like to get as much information out to the racing community. Whenever or wherever you're watching these episodes, we hope that you enjoyed them